Hi everyone, I'm Harv, Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and this is Stuff That Matters Now. Okay, welcome back everybody. I just found out where I am. I'm in Herne Bay, which apparently is the largest Audi capital of the world. And I am talking to James McCarthy, who has admitted just now that he actually owns an Audi as well.
Oh, it's far too old for Herne Bay though.
James, you can't talk. I haven't fucking introduced you yet. Okay, this is my interview and you're supposed to do what I tell you.
You just told me you're not going to edit it, so we'll be fine.
James thought we edited it. We don't. So I am talking to James McCarthy, who is a little bit famous in his own head. And no, he's not famous. No, he's taken offence already. Okay, James, we're going to do this and we're going to be serious. So, James, thank you for your time. I'm interviewing James, who was our first ever scholarship recipient. An epic meeting.
An epic failure.
An epic failure. He's gone downhill ever since then. And James is the founder of Spider Tracks, which tracks stuff around the world, planes and things. And I'm interested about that journey. And is now, he got the sack out of Spider Tracks, and he's now starting. Well, I'm going to say starting. You've started Cradle, your next startup. And I'm interviewing James because he's a really interesting bastard. He's argumentative. He's got his own thoughts. And I'm interested to know how this thing goes. We'll find out in the next wee while. So, James, where do you want to start? Where should we start?
Well, we should start at the beginning, I guess.
With your birth?
That's pretty boring, isn't it?
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that.
I think we should. I think we should talk about my childhood.
Okay.
About where I'm from.
Okay, go. Where are you from?
I'm from the Manawatu. My parents were dairy farmers, which is an interesting place for me to start. And I grew up riding four-wheelers and raising calves. I had calves for Lamb and Calf Day all throughout childhood. Went to Whakaronga school, and interestingly, at my cousin's 6th birthday, I think, I went to her 6th birthday, and there was a clown. A real clown. His name was Tricky, and he said, and he was Canadian. And where are you from? And I was like, oh, I'm from Palmerston North. Oh, what school do you go to? And I said, Whakaronga. And I thought I was swearing at him. He had no idea what was going on. Anyway, look, the calves are an interesting part of the story that we can talk about later. But yeah, grew up on a dairy farm.
What? Go. Why are the calves important?
Dad basically sold me the calves on credit. At the beginning of the season, and then I raised them, and subsequently they were sold, and I got to pay him out of the profit for the milk that they drank. So it was an early lesson in buying something and working on your own asset, basically, and then being able to sell it for a bit more later.
And how many cows?
Oh, one a year.
Oh, so this is
when I was 6.
This is your calf day. This is not lots of. This is 6-year-old with one calf taking to calf day, and you had a commercial transaction with your old man.
Exactly. It was a sort of an advanced form of pocket money, I guess.
Right. And what did that instill in you?
Well, as I just said, it's a really good demonstration of owning something and working on your own asset and putting effort into something that you can, materially change your future with, I guess. Yeah.
And leveraging a whole lot of relationships and calling favours and
leveraging the free credit of of Te Whānau. But,
And so, James, you're a long way from the farm in Manawatu.
Yeah, this is about as far from a dairy farm in the rural Manawatu.
Have you told your parents that you live in Herne Bay?
Oh yeah. Dad actually helped renovate this apartment.
Did he? Was he proud of you? Not really.
I think he is.
Is that, yeah?
Dad was actually born in Devonport, so I'm not actually that far from where he started.
Okay.
But the journey just had a detour along the way, I guess.
Yeah. So growing up, what was the thing bubbling around in your head that you wanted to do?
I'm not sure it was so much wanting to do something, but I would describe myself as a very curious kid. I used to piss everybody off by asking why continuously.
You still do?
Oh, no. And if something didn't have a good reason, it was very difficult to get me to do it.
Right.
And that curiosity also went into tangible things, so I'd pull everything to bits.
Right.
I'd pull pens to bits. I'd pull four-wheelers to bits. Anything that I could pull to bits and put back together, I would do that with. So there was a lot of just interest in how the world worked and how things worked and how things could be made better, I guess. And a farm's a great place to explore those sorts of things because you've got to solve problems that there aren't necessarily out-of-the-box solutions for.
Yep.
And you have to do that all the time.
Yep. And so you went off to local school, Palms North.
Yeah, I went to Palmy Boys.
Yeah. And so up until then, it's all quite normal. You're looking like or trying to pretend to be a normal kid.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's just perfectly normal.
Perfectly normal.
Yeah.
And so where did it all go wrong, James?
I went to Massey University, and I guess so. The plan had been to go to Melbourne and do a sort of do a Bachelor of Engineering and a Bachelor of Science joint degree. And I kind of found university a bit boring and dry. And I decided I'd stay at Massey because I could get through there in 3 years.
Right.
And at the end of uni, I just hated the academic stuff. There was a scary day when Li Chong was my professor for my final year project. And I saw her down the hallway one day and I was just sick of all of the stuff that I was doing. It seemed so arbitrary and lacking in real application, and I just turned around and ran away. Yeah, so it started all unraveling about then, and at the end of uni I said to Mum, I don't care about any of this stuff. I'm going to go and work in Kevin. So Kermie, who owned like Fielding Chainsaw and Mower Services or something, I was going to go and fix lawn mowers. I hadn't told Mum and Dad this, but that was my plan, and I'm sure that Kermie wouldn't have had a job for me anyway. But that was my plan in my own head at the age of 20, and just go and do something where I could see something that I'd done at the end of the day.
Yeah, and get away from this academic shit. And
yeah, Mum insisted that I go and get a job though, so a proper job.
A proper job.
Yeah. So I went and worked for. She found this job on Student Job Search, working for a company called Seed Spider. So Don and a guy called Mike were sitting there, and they interviewed me. And they offered me a job on the spot, which was pretty weird. They were out in the valley.
Seed Spider.
Seed Spider.
What does that do?
So so Don came up with this concept for planting your salad crops, which have tiny seeds and lots and lots and lots of them. So he came up with this concept for planting them really repeatably, so in a sort of nice even distribution. And irrespective of the speed of the tractor, so it was all related to the speed of the tractor. And the thing looked a little bit like a spider. It was kind of this cylindrical tube with a whole lot of hoses coming out of it.
Yep. And
so we called it a seed spider.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess that's where the spider track story sort of kicks off as well.
So just going back, why did they give you the job?
Oh, I don't know. I think they probably regretted it later. I don't know. I was willing to drive to Pahongina.
That's a piss poor answer. Fuck, this could be a long interview, Chase. So you actually took the job?
I did, yeah. They offered me the job on the spot. I think they offered me $12 an hour, which I think it was $2 an hour more than that advertised.
Right, so it's a lot. So what were you supposed to be doing for these guys?
So inside this thing that they make is a sponge, which grabs the seeds and drags them through a channel. And these sponges need to be glued onto an aluminium hub and then ground to the right shape. So my job was to glue them onto a hub and then grind them to the right shape.
So sponge, explain what a sponge is.
A sponge is just literally a sponge.
Right.
It's like a gigantic piece of sponge that we would cut
out
circles
out of the sea, or
no, like
artificial
sponge.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for $12 an hour, you're cutting these and you're grinding them to a space and you're gluing them.
Yeah, it was riveting.
Is that a joke? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll pass it off as a joke. Nobody's laughing, but that's okay. And how long were you there for?
So I was there, I had to my 400 hours for uni, and I worked a little bit longer than that, and then I buggered off to Europe for the best part of a year. My brother was racing bikes over there, and I just went and hung out.
Oh, this is the talented brother, Luke.
Yeah, this is the as an aside, when email was first a thing, right, and you got your first email address with some ridiculous @hotmail thing, I got this email from Mum at work, and it said nothing except Luke is my favourite. Clearly, Luke had learnt how to email at this point, and he was deciding to troll me. But anyway, this is the more talented younger brother.
Yeah, more handsome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is push bikes. This is proper racing. Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. He was racing in the Midi-Pyrenees, so down near Toulouse.
Yep.
And I just went and hung out with him and his team, and went riding.
Were you any use? Like, could you fix the bikes and stuff like that?
I think I cleaned their flat a lot.
Right. So you went from being a sponge guy to a cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Luke, let's touch on Luke, because Luke was seriously, like, he was international.
So 2 years before that, he raced in the World Champs as a junior. And he did really well at the Worlds. He came off, actually, but ended up jumping back on his bike and coming in. I know that he was about 2 or 3 places in front of the guy who won the Tour de France a couple of years later.
Right.
Anyway, he seriously determined son of a bitch, and that guy just will not give up. Yeah, if he's got the bit between his teeth, he's gonna finish or win or make it, whatever that means.
Yeah, you told me on the hill climb he was just a monster.
Yeah, absolutely, and like he was just like lungs and legs basically. There was not a lot of meat on the body.
No,
no,
he's a pretty bloody he's a pretty efficient dude. So you're over there. Yep.
Yeah, just basically enjoying life for a wee while and getting away and trying to, I guess, overcome the frustration with my choices around university and study. Did that. Hung out with some Kiwis, met a whole bunch of French people, had a good time.
Yep.
Came back to New Zealand when it started getting cold, and went back to work for the same company again. And you'll remember, so October, I got back in August or September. And November that year was when Michael Ursig went missing.
So just talk us through that, because some people haven't heard that story. So what year were we at?
So this is 2005, which is a bloody long time ago now. People born in that year are 15 now, Harv, for your benefit.
Yeah.
Michael Ursig started a company called Independent Liquor. So they were the sort of like the first non-Lion Nathan and Dominion breweries sellers of liquor on a mass scale in New Zealand. They had a few varieties of beer, but their real strength had been, I've got to delicately word this, brightly coloured drinks with a little bit of alcohol in them for the younger part of the population.
That was delicate. Yeah.
But they sold a whole variety of drinks. And anyway, Michael started that company in the 80s, I think, and he'd got himself to a pretty decent position.
Financially. And
he was flying his relatively new EC-120, which is a
helicopter.
It's it's basically like think of it as like the 7 Series BM of helicopters. It's not a Bentley or anything ridiculous like that, but still, decent car.
Yeah.
And he was flying with a mate of his from the Netherlands down to Queenstown, and they went missing. They just didn't show up. And at the time, the best way they had of knowing that he hadn't shown up was that Airways, who were monitoring his flight by having a timeout on his flight plan, just noticed that he didn't close his flight plan. They had no idea where he was. He just vanished off radar, and he was somewhere between Auckland and Queenstown, which is
literally. No, but you'd have some time, like you'd sort of have an idea where he was.
Well, the first indication they knew he hadn't got past Wanganui because he was meant to refuel there, and he didn't. So they narrowed it down to that, and then they spent the next 2.5 weeks looking. It was big news at the time, and his brother spent a decent amount of time on the national news. The country pumped a couple of million into looking for him, and his family, once the sort of the official search was off, his family continued that search.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was actually this is a long old memory now, but I think it was John Fennell who was a search and rescue guy from way back.
He's in Taupo.
Taupo, yeah. And he sort of jumped on the case after that, and they basically just followed his radar track as it left. I think they had him on radar leaving Port Waikato or somewhere like that, and did a bit of searching, and they found him in a 13-metre wide gully, and the wings, or the rotor span of his helicopter is 12 metres, so he kind of hit the bush pretty much smack in the centre.
Right.
Yeah, but it's sad when someone dies, but it is crazy that a modern, well-equipped aircraft can just go missing and not be found in 2005, right? And we saw the same thing again 8 years after that with MH370, and everyone gets on we don't anymore, but we used to get on airplanes and fly around the world and believe that no matter what happened, someone would know where we are. It turns out that's not the case, right?
So what did that set off inside you, that accident? So
we as a team, and I'm not going to take full credit for any of this. There were 3 or 4 of us working on this, and there was a problem. And the first part of creating a business, or at least a product, is understanding that it's got to do something for somebody. It's got to solve some pain or problem, or give them something that they didn't have before. And the problem here is that an aircraft can just vanish off the face of the earth and no one knows where it is. The need for Don, Don from Seed Spider, as himself a helicopter pilot, was that he wasn't going to have the same fate befall him. So he wanted something so that his wife would be able to track him, so that she wouldn't be worried if he decided to park up on the desert road because it was foggy or something. And also so that if something did happen, that someone would be able to go and find him. So we pedaled around looking for solutions to this problem, and nothing seemed overly great. Everything was really heavy. The helicopter's basically a gigantic aluminium can with a motor and a couple of rotor blades, a rotor and a tail rotor. There's not a lot to it. They look like they're this big, strong thing, but actually the rotor is like the center of inertia and mass and everything when they're moving. So carrying a lot of weight's not really an option. We had these sort of criteria. We had not a lot of space. Whatever we built had to be light. It had to work anywhere, and it needed to provide the outcome that we wanted, which was that no matter where that aircraft flew, we could tell where it was.
So there's you and Don.
Yep, there was a young engineer who I went through uni with called Kahu, and then a couple of other people around the edges who were doing various bits and pieces. We had like school kids at some point that were building spiders for us.
And so you've got the problem identified, and then you're working out just how to. So how much time were you spending on that?
Oh, that was full time.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what we were doing.
And where did the seed money come from to do that?
So the seed money. So there were sort of 2 tranches to that. So we were doing that within the context of Don's company for a while, and then we spun that out into its own company. And Bruce, who was our first customer, he put some money in, and my family and I put some money in.
Yep. And
then we, continued to fund it through the founding shareholders.
Right.
Yeah.
And James, what's it? Because you've done this twice. Not many people I know have had 2 startups in the tech space. What are the stages you go through?
So, as a fantastic imposter myself, you go through I can't do this, or if it works, why am I going to make it any more likely to be successful?
Yep.
You have all of the doubts, and then you have why can't I do this thoughts. I remember, so, Luke's been introduced to the story, so anyone who's still with us will appreciate an update. So at this point, Luke had actually been diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he was sitting there one day, with no hair, probably down to about 45 or 50 kilos at this point.
This is back in Palmerston.
This is back in Palmy.
Yep.
And I'm discussing whether or not I should do this with Mum and Luke, and I don't think Dad was there at this particular moment, but Luke looks at me and goes, well, what have you got to lose? And when someone who's staring down the barrel of, losing a hell of a lot more than just, a couple of years of their life and maybe some money.
Because I know this story well. I mean, Luke's life was very much at risk at that stage, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it kind of, like his perspective on the whole thing gave me a very different attitude, I guess.
Right.
And a willingness to take risks.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going...
Because the total worst outcome was still far, far better than anything that he was staring down the barrel of. So,
I love the term first world problem.
Yeah.
Right? And it's the number of times I hear people go, yeah, but there's a first world problem. It's just like, get a grip.
Yeah.
How bad can this get, really? Yeah. And it's a bloody good to remind yourself at times that, because Luke was still in the first world, but he was just at the bottom rung of the first world at that point.
Yeah. Well, he's bloody lucky to be in the first world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got through.
Yeah.
So that's 15 years. No, so when did you start Spider?
So we're just coming into 2007 now.
Right.
Yeah. So we started some of the early exploration stuff with spider tracks in 2006. And I think we sold Bruce his spider in November 2006, maybe. So that's when we started. I remember putting a budget together and thinking, well, if we can sell 160 of these things, we'll be set. And that was 2006. The next financial year, I think we sold like 180. So we just eclipsed what we'd hoped that we'd do.
Right. And these were, so this is a piece of kit that goes in a helicopter.
Yeah, I'll show you one afterwards. Well, it's not very useful for anyone else.
It's a podcast, you dick. They can't see. Right. So a piece of kit that goes in the helicopter.
Yeah.
Which is sort of how big?
It's if you can imagine the size of a $100 note.
I've never seen one actually, but
like
yeah,
$100 a $5 note, 2 5.
Right.
It's about that big and about 30 mils tall.
Okay, and that sits in the helicopter.
It does.
And then what does that actually do?
It's pretty simple, really. It's got GPS and a satellite transceiver in it, and it just takes the GPS coordinate at given intervals and sends it out over a satellite network. And then we sort of suck the data out of the sat network at the other end, and we show it to someone. It was really basic in the beginning. It emailed a point to an email inbox, and we checked that email box every 2 minutes, and we updated it wasn't even called Google Earth at that point. It was called...
Oh, so you're monitoring via an email coming in.
It was pretty... V0.1 was pretty sketchy.
But I love hearing these stories of what you actually start with.
Yeah.
Right, so it's bleeping up somewhere and coming into every 2 minutes on an email.
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah. Oh, the team now would be horrified at what we did back then, but...
Yeah, they won't listen to this. They'll be right.
No.
And then in the second year, you've sold 180 of these.
Yeah, it was about 180.
All in New Zealand.
No, we didn't actually. Don and I went to Geelong, to the Avalon Air Show, halfway between Melbourne and Geelong in 2007. And the Department of Sustainability and Environment in Victoria, who have responsibility for some of the firefighting stuff. The aerial firefighting. This guy, and I can't remember his name now, but he showed up at the stand and he's like, oh, look, this looks really good. We might need some of these. Took a card, and then he emailed us, and he bought 20 within about 2 weeks, and we hadn't even made 20 in total at this point in time. I had to put, I think Luke and I were building. Oh, was Luke building them? Someone was helping me build them. We put them all together. It might have been Kahu and me, and put them all in a box, $60,000 Australian, that we were going to get paid when they arrived, and I didn't have money for the insurance, so we just shipped them uninsured in a DHL box out of Palmerston North. I'm sweating as I'm driving this box into Palmy.
And did they pay?
They paid. They continued to pay. They've been a really good customer. Yeah, and that opened up a niche for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So So you've got your first proper big sale.
First proper big sale. We were buoyed, by that, and we went to Oshkosh in July that year. That was a waste of time.
Went to where?
Oshkosh. So Oshkosh is in Wisconsin. It's sort of halfway between. I don't know. It's in Wisconsin.
Right, okay.
It's in one of those states.
I thought it was a brand of clothes, kids' clothes.
It's also that, but I think that's named after Oshkosh. Anyway, it's the biggest air show for experimental aircraft in the world,
right.
And lots of enthusiast private pilots will go there, and they have a really, really busy tower for that week in July.
And James, at what point did you think, we might actually turn this into a company?
I think so. That first year was really hard, and every sale was hard won. But our business model was relatively new at the time. It was similar to a cell phone model. We sold a piece of hardware, and then we charged people to use it. And provided we kept providing value to them, they would continue to pay for it.
And what was the value?
So the value is the value. There are two streams of value for people, essentially. The first one is peace of mind. Are you admiring my plants there?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying if we're plugged in. Carry on.
The first thing is peace of mind, right? So it's nice knowing where your aircraft are. If you've got 10 aircraft and they're all worth $2.5 million and a bunch of pilots that you're not sure you trust flying them around, there's some value in knowing where they are, and in knowing that if something goes wrong, you can go and look for them.
Right.
But that's not enough to sell this product. That's like trying to sell insurance, and I don't want to be an insurance salesman. So having that data at your fingertips also gives you this sort of command and control element, which from an operational perspective is really useful. If you know that aircraft's 15 minutes away instead of half an hour, you can start bringing other jobs forward. You can optimize the way you're running your business because you've got better insight. And things that you used to have to do, like talking to your pilots by radio or doing something else to find out where they are, you can redistribute that effort onto something else. So there's an operational benefit, as well as a sort of like a peace of mind / insurance on the early products. We've got much better now.
Well, I was going to say, you go into the Spider Tracks bloody office now, and it's like the League of Nations. You've got every bloody nationality there, but a big chunk of the people there are working on research and development.
Yeah, about half the team are, or just under half the team are R&D.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So what are those buggers doing?
Well, we've really become this brand that's associated with both saving lives and helping these businesses just be better. So be more efficient, have better control of their fleet. And we're looking at a future where we can help aviation companies extract more from their assets. So reduce waste, improve the way that aircraft are utilised at a high level. So we've got a bunch of people who are creating things that help with this. So, back then we were just sending 1 point every 2 minutes off an aircraft.
Yeah.
Now we're basically continuously streaming data off the aircraft, and it's not just where the aircraft is and where it's going, but it's how it's being flown. How the pilot's treating the aircraft. Is the aircraft operating in the way that it's meant to be operated? Again, the world's changed a lot in 2020, but a year ago, pilot demand was a huge problem for the industry. So hiring pilots that had enough hours was a problem. And building up hours is expensive because aircraft are expensive. So you don't want to do it unless there's a use for your time. So being able to have insight into how the pilots are flying aircraft so that you can put a less experienced pilot, but one that you can monitor and also that you can tell is flying the aircraft properly is really valuable.
And you've got that data and they can't bullshit it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And you get, all of the other operational benefits of having digital information about what jobs the aircraft are on, where they're flying. You can meet all kinds of regulatory compliance requirements using our system that you might not be able to automatically. So, for example, if you're flying, and I'm speaking from 5 years ago for some of the things that we were intending to do back then, because I'm not operationally involved anymore. But back then we were looking at things like the National Park Service in the States and the Department of Conservation in New Zealand. They have requirements about the people, or for the companies that have licenses to fly into their airspace or their land. And like, for example, to do deer culling or any of that sort of thing, drop hunters off. They're only allowed to drop a certain number off, or drop them in certain places, or they're not allowed to overfly certain areas. And with our products installed, they can demonstrate that they are complying,
right,
and they can do that at a much cheaper cost than having to manually record all of the stuff.
Right, yeah. And the pilot doesn't have to worry about it; it's just been done automatically.
Exactly.
Have you had pushback from people that might be a bit dodgy in what they're doing, and just going, "Oh no, we don't want to be monitored"?
That was an interesting problem that we faced back in, I want to say, 08, 09, 2010. We dipped our toes into the world of recreational flyers, so private pilots who own an aircraft for their own pleasure, basically. And a lot of them would say things like, "I don't want my wife knowing where I'm going," or "I'm not going to crash. Why do I need something like this?" Which was interesting. It's really fascinating to see the mindset of these guys, and they're all that kind of that right stuff mentality where they're never going to crash and they're bulletproof and all that, and you just get, you know what? Okay, fine.
Because how do you argue against that?
Yeah, you can't argue against that.
And why would you even want to?
But the industry is becoming more and more professional, and the industry from a commercial perspective has always been very professional, very safety focused, and anything that they can do to collect data which helps them improve the safety of the industry and of their own operation is generally something that's looked upon favourably. So it wasn't too much of a problem in the commercial world.
James, you mentioned before you're not involved in Spider Tracks now on an operational level, so you're a shareholder.
That's correct.
And are you a director as well?
I am.
Are you any good as a director?
Probably not.
No, serious question. Which are you? So you've moved out of the operations.
I left in 2015. I'd been there essentially a decade. It's just shy of a decade worth of my life went into that project. And you can only be fresh and new and enthusiastic about something for so long. And it's a very niche business, so it's also a very niche, it's a very slow-moving industry. So if you're someone who thrives on change and new, a little bit like me, it can get a little bit stale. And I got stale in that role. Around me were a team of really capable people.
So you were the CEO?
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
And that team deserves some space to grow and to be able to take that company where it, to the sort of places that it's gone now. So it made sense for me to step back and let Dave and the other people that were there take over.
So this is Dave Blackwell, who we have interviewed before. But because of the interesting thing with you, James, for somebody who's just a difficult man sometimes, you build bloody good teams.
Yeah, I actually don't think I do. I think I struggle with that. I know that it's something that's really important though, and Dave was an obvious hire at the time for reasons that weren't necessarily obvious, and that might sound somewhat. I don't know if calling it Irish makes me racist, but it might sound somewhat backward, but stick with me. So he asked questions that I didn't know the answers to, and he presented solutions, and when he was talking, you're having this realization and becoming, it's like you've got a map of the world, and you've kind of you've reached the edge of what you know, and you know that there's probably something beyond the edge of where you've been, but no one's ever shown you, or you've never been there. And he's just got a pencil and he's colouring it in slowly, and I'm going, oh wow, look, there is something at the end of the world.
Right.
So
So my assumption that you were good at building teams, you lucked out getting Dave, who's then built a great team.
I pursued Dave for a long time to get him to join. I don't think it's necessarily true that I'm not good at building teams, or that I lucked out. Like we've had a consistently great team across those years, and because the company's changed so much, the team has had to change and grow with that. There's been a huge element of luck in that, and I think I'm generally a pretty passionate and driven sort of person, and that attracts a certain type of person to it. And in that regard, I think like we've done pretty well. But I wouldn't put that success down to me being deliberately good at building teams. I think if you put me in a corporate and said build a team of 500 people, I'd be absolutely terrible.
So what are you good at?
I won't say that I'm good at this, but I think I'm frustrated with things that don't work properly or that could be better. I look at so many things and I see how they could be better. As a customer of anything, I find it incredibly frustrating when people don't have flexibility to help a customer get what they need within the circumstances of whatever business it is. I'll give you an example. And Dave will laugh when he possibly listens to this, but
nobody listens to this, mate.
Oh, yeah, we're so far deep. Everyone's bored now. We went to the States a lot, and like I have a love-hate relationship with being in the US. And, I like a flat white, like a lot of New Zealand does, and Americans love a really super hot, super bitter coffee that's about the size of a small lake.
Yeah.
I went to this coffee shop at the hotel that we were staying at and said, "Hey, look, I just would love an 8-ounce coffee with milk, just foamed milk, 8 ounces." And she said, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't have an 8-ounce cup." And I thought, that's really lacking in imagination, but let me help you with that. So do you have a bigger cup? And she's like, "Oh, yeah, we do. We have a 12-ounce cup." I was like, "Excellent. Just stop when you get to 8 ounces." And she just couldn't do it. There was no amount of explaining or helping or anything was going to get that across the line for her. And I think it's just a failure of organizations to let their team do what they need to do to give their customers a good experience. And so people just are continually disappointed, and that's a small example, but I see all sorts of examples of that sort of thing in the world. And it just frustrates me. So that's what I'm good at. I'm good at getting pissed off with things that could be better.
So James's superpower is to get grumpy. Brilliant. But it's interesting, James, because, I mean, you have been, really critical of collective intelligence from time to time with different stuff. And you're really good at going, not happy with this, improve something. And generally it's pretty pointed. It's worth listening to.
Well, thanks, Harv.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think you've got complaining and you've got moaning, and I think complaining is generally useful and you can turn it around and it can be constructive, and moaning's just identifying a problem and then completely doing nothing about it.
Yeah.
And that sort of behaviour just drives me insane.
Yeah, because we've got a handful of members, and I go, if they're happy, everybody's happy, right? And you're in that space, right? If James is happy, then we might be on track, and that is a compliment because it's I mean, you give a shit. You've always given a shit, and you've always come from a place of this could be better. And sometimes it's really not that convenient to hear it. There have been times I've thought, "Oh, just fuck off, James, and leave us alone." But it has always been worth listening to. Always, yeah.
I think so.
So then you got what? Are you any good as a director?
Yeah, that question again. I don't know. You'd have to ask my fellow directors if I'm any good as a director.
Do you think you're any good as a director?
I think I'm all right. I think there's a lot of scope for improvement. I think I understand the responsibilities of a director really well, and I do a good job of keeping my hands out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difficult thing for me to do though, because I am a doer. I am a
this is your baby.
Yeah, I've actually done particularly well with this one. So I stepped back for 2 years, completely removed myself from the business, and it's much easier when you've had a break to come back and frame your role very differently, and that's what I did.
Right, and that was conscious, just to give you that demarcation line.
Yeah, partially for me, but probably more for Dave's sake, because it would be, well, personally, I had one of the people who used to work in the business leave and then show up the next month at a board meeting, and it's not particularly useful for anybody for that to happen. It's hard it's especially hard as a director to leave an executive role and then show up and not just put your executive pants back on.
Yeah. Okay, so then Spider Tracks at the moment from the outside looks to be going really well.
It is, yeah. It's a fantastic company, and it's a tribute to the team that are there now. How well that company's done. It solves a real problem for the market. We built over 10 or 15 years. We've built an incredible brand with a lot of loyal customers all around the world. From the New Zealand Inc. perspective, it drags in 90% of its revenue from offshore. Most of the team are here in New Zealand. We pay a lot of tax in PAYE, which is really good, and we've had critical pieces of support from New Zealand Inc. Or Her Majesty's government at critical moments along that journey.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm really, really proud of the team that are there and of that company.
And James, how many people does it employ now?
Oh, it's around 40.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and as you mentioned, nearly half of them are in R&D. There's a decent number of people in sales, marketing, growth. A couple of ops people. And
it's a League of Nations, James.
It's an absolute League of Nations.
You go in there and just go, what country am I in? Which is just fabulous to see all these different nationalities there.
Yeah, and a lot of that speaks to the the skill set that New Zealand needs to enter into the new set of economies that we're heading towards, or the new economy that we're heading towards. We need technical people. We need a whole lot of skills that we just haven't had here and we haven't trained for here, or that we've trained but they've subsequently gone offshore. So, in these types of industries, you do end up with a lot of people from a lot of different countries, and that's that brings its own challenges, but it brings its own rewards as well. It brings a lot of different perspectives and ways of thinking, which, as I say, challenges and rewards.
Yeah. And James, are those, they say at the moment we're in a brain gain with people coming back to New Zealand. Are the techies coming back to New Zealand?
I don't know. I haven't myself been hiring in that space over the last 6 months. There's an abundance of talent that is now available that wasn't available 6 months ago, and I think that's more a function of a lot of companies just being a bit deer in the headlights about the future, about trying to preserve cash, and not taking this opportunity whilst money's cheap, whilst there are lots of people and lots of talent searching for jobs, to really get the jump on the rest of the market and show up in the world 2 years from now with a fantastic set of products that do what they can do twice as well as anyone else.
Yep.
So I think now is a great opportunity for getting a jump on everyone else. So
James, before we move on to your next startup, Cradle, because it's classic at the end, and you just go, okay, so he's been on a journey. What was some of the biggest challenges that you needed to get over coming through? Because I know there's been some massive challenges going through, and it's all very well looking at Spider now and going, yep, we've done it and so forth. What were the what were the things where you absolutely got your ass kicked?
Oh, I thought we were just going to like post-rationalize some fantastic fairy tale. I think, and I told you that I didn't want to talk about some things, but now I'm going to talk about them anyway. So I think the hardest thing about business, in my experience, and my experience is, just one person over 16 years, but the hardest things that I've been through have been the marriage and divorce associated with business partners. And, you need a team. You can't do this on your own. And in the early stage of any product-based company, there's a huge amount of work that needs to go in before you've got something viable. And that either requires a lot of capital or a lot of sweat equity, essentially. So the balance between that sweat equity or that capital and delivering a product which can generate enough revenue to become self-sustaining or to attract further investment generally requires you to bring other people on that journey. And that was hard within the context of Spider Tracks and in the context of Cradle. You end up with a team of people, and generally they're really high energy, intelligent, determined, slightly risk-taking people, or quite risk-taking people. And that's a stable full of racehorses. All just, if they're all pulling together, great. If they're kicking each other, man, she's going to be a bloodbath. So getting a founding team, and I look at some companies I look at Sharesies as a great example of a group of, I think there are 8 co-founders in Sharesies, and I admire those guys for being able to pull that off and to have such a fantastic product and company and story that goes with it. I don't know how they do it. Maybe I'm an obnoxious person, and that could be the case. Maybe I have high standards.
You are.
But probably the most challenging thing is communicating well with the team that has been pulled together, and making sure that you're all on the page all of those steps of the way, and that when someone's not on the same page, either getting them back or finding a way for people to leave.
Communicating what, James? Because I hear this communication thing all the time, right? And it's just like, I've said the word communicating, so that's good. Communicating what?
I think, for me, the key thing that I've failed on is having a shared, and it's just really high level and very basic strategy. It's just having a shared vision for what your future looks like, and then having a few rungs down the ladder from that you all share and all really believe in. Because that makes the discussions at a more tactical and operational level, one about much simpler things to overcome. Provided you believe in this, you can have a discussion about these things really easily.
Yeah.
Well, not really easily, but more easily. If you don't have that, or that's got lost somewhere, all of this other stuff just becomes impossible to resolve.
And I saw that this year with somebody, and I said, look, I can't remember what it was, but I said, look, you need to realise that the person that you are at loggerheads with has got different values to you. And you can't bridge that gap, because if your values don't align, you can't work with them. And the number of people that go into business with somebody else that's got a different, they're attracted to the shiny idea, but their value set is so different.
Yeah.
And then they're going, why isn't this working?
Yeah.
And I point out to them and going, hey, this is not going to work. And they were like, well, that's a bit harsh. I said, no, you cannot, and because they were having, they're trying to remember what it was now, but they were having trouble with getting this venture up and going, and they'd just been blindsided by some just terrible bloody behaviour. And I said, well, it's not terrible behaviour. They don't think it's terrible behaviour. And you need to understand that. And this hasn't been successful, and you need to understand that you've been let off the hook here. And they were heartbroken this deal wasn't going to go ahead. And I said, geez, if this had got over the line, now you would be in an absolute 5 years of absolute hell. trying to get out of that divorce.
Yeah, and it truly is a divorce. Yeah, it's a real commitment when you start a business with someone else, and you're absolutely right. Your values have got to align, or the things that you hold dear must be shared enough that you don't end up in a proxy argument about them. Talking about something doesn't look like a values discussion, but really just relates to the fact that your values are different. Yeah.
So you came back here because you went AWOL for a little while and cruised around the world and did some stuff.
Yeah, that's my sort of modus operandi.
Yeah, and you weren't tempted to go back to Massey's. So the next, I'm going to call it a niche, was what to start up Cradle? What was that itch?
So Spider-Tracks had customers all over the world, and they would call us and not get the right person. And we internally had problems with the sort of the functional aspects of communication. We had tools for everything. We had an ancestor, if you like, to Slack, which was called HipChat. We had tickets in our job system. We had wiki pages. We had all sorts of things. We had all of these ways that we could store and communicate information between two people. And we really failed to put a good tool in place that enabled people just to talk to each other. And it kind of became the last option when everything else had failed, instead of the first, the go-to, hey, let's have a quick chat and then document it somewhere else. It ended one day with one of my team asking a series of questions about the message that I should have got. That was about a ticket that was about a Confluence page that related to approving a budget for something. And I was like, it's not a great management moment, but I was like, talk to me like a fucking human. And anyway, so this concept of talking like humans sort of sat in the back of my mind, and we did that same thing to our customers. There's a famous story in the company, which it may not be famous anymore, but in my memory it is, around a customer in somewhere, and one of our team had asked him just to chuck the Spider, in his car and go for a drive. Just take it for a drive into town and then come back. And the guy lived in some country, and it was somewhere like Sudan, or somewhere where you couldn't just drive outside your compound. And his response was, so you're asking me to take this thing out of the $20 million aircraft, put it into my car, and go driving around a war zone to see if it's going to work. I was like, oh, wow, we're really not communicating well with our customers. Why are we doing everything by email and this and this and this, instead of just talking to them sometimes? And, a traditional industry, lots of people who aren't 25 years old. And sometimes the phone's just the most natural way to talk to people. And so what I wanted to do was take this phone, this PBX, this horrible old piece of crap that generally sits in a cupboard somewhere, and bring it into the modern era, so that a customer can pick up the phone and anyone on the team, or the most appropriate person on the team, can answer the phone, and the phone call can go from being an anxiety-inducing experience where you don't get an answer to being a pleasure.
So I've got the concept. How does it work?
It's broadly speaking, it's just a phone system.
But why is it different? Because there are lots of phone systems. So why is your phone system different?
So it does all of the things that you would expect a phone system to do.
Which is?
It rings. Someone can call a business and it will get someone on the end of the phone. It'll play them a message, ask them to push buttons. It can record the phone calls. It can do voicemail. It can do business hours. It can forward calls to another number. It can transfer calls, all of those sorts of things. But more importantly, what we've done is we've integrated quite deeply, and we've only done it with one CRM at this point, and that's enough for the sort of niche we're targeting. But we pull as much context as we can out of that CRM, so that when the phone rings, the person who answers knows who you are. You should never have to answer the phone and go, oh, sorry, what's your account number, and what's your order number, what are you talking to me about? It just be, oh, well, I can see that you placed an order yesterday. Let me look that up for you. So the first thing is to give the person who answers as much context as possible. We also use the
so
data.
so that when I ring, so if this so someone clear, I'll ring somebody. I'm a customer. I ring in, and they can go, "Hello, Ian." They know who I am straight away, and they've got that information comes up on the screen. So I'm a human right at the beginning, not a number.
Exactly. And if you've got an account manager who looks after your account, we'll get them on the line, provided they're available. So even if you're dealing with a business that has 100 people, you have a contact and we'll recognize that and connect you back to that person each time, so that you're not bouncing around and having to explain your life to 16 different people. You just have someone who's already up to speed.
Right. So you were talking with Richard, and then you ring back and you got Sarah, and sometimes Sarah doesn't even know Richard exists, because that happens.
Yeah.
And you go, which Richard? I'm going, oh, fuck do I know? I just got his first name. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, providing context and access into other sources of information for the person answering the phone, and then collecting up all that data and presenting it back to managers. Because what we learnt was that, so basically our enemy is the shitty phone experience. Our enemy or our problem is the business that you call, where you explain your life, you get transferred, and the person who you get transferred to wants your life to be explained again, and then they tell you that they can't help you. Or they aren't there. And you
can be put on hold in between.
Wait for hours. Yeah.
Yep.
So shitty phone experiences are a function, from our perspective, of poor tooling. So the person answering the phone doesn't have fit-for-purpose equipment so that they can help you. And the second part of it is that the person answering the phone is the wrong person to be answering the phone. And that's borne out in the data. We see the people that don't like answering the phone or that aren't good on the phone. We can see that by the way they answer the phone, by the amount of calls that they miss, by the amount of calls that they transfer to other people. So giving data to the right people so they can have the right person on the phone, and then giving the people who answer the phone the right tools so that when they answer, they can delight you quickly and get on.
So what's a perfect customer for Cradle?
A perfect customer is distributed, which is everyone in 2020. They value their customers and they want to talk to them when the customers want to talk to them. We have some people just want you to leave a message or go to their website. That's not our customer. Generally selling services or products to other businesses, not to consumers, unless they're really high value products. So typically teams of around 10 to 100 people selling something that's worth more than $1,000 but less than $100,000 a year. That's generally a pretty good customer for us.
Right.
Yeah. And they'll get varying degrees of value, but generally pretty high value out of us.
And ideally your system would patch into the CRM to pull that out, right? So that's a critical piece of development going forward.
Yeah, so making sure we're integrated properly with the appropriate CRMs so that we can serve those customers.
Right. And what's been the biggest challenge for you getting Cradle up and going?
I think what I spoke to earlier is still very true. Like getting the right team and bringing that team together has been a really big challenge for me, and I haven't done particularly well at it. And then more than that, resourcing that team. So fundraising is something that scares the living shit out of me.
Even now?
Yeah, I'm getting better at it now. I've actually, even this year has taught me a lot about that. And I think the third thing that I have struggled with as a sort of a product-focused founder would be that your product has to solve a problem for people and they have to be willing to pay for it. And it's incumbent upon you or me, it still is incumbent upon me to put myself out there and go and talk to potential customers and people who would be potential targets and ask them what their problems are, and then show them what solutions could look like and see if they'll buy them. as a founder of a business like this, you have to be willing to get out there and quote unquote pound pavements and sell your wares. And if you're not going to learn. And that's really scary for someone with an engineering degree. The idea of being a slicked hair salesman with a briefcase and a Rolex is not that exciting.
Mm. Mm. So the capital raise, what have you learnt this year?
I've learnt that, this year's been an interesting year. I've learnt that honesty and transparency with your investors is really important. And if you bring them along on a journey, generally people will come with you. I've learnt that it's much the same as sales. It's really about going out there and testing things. And the two sort of go hand in hand. You have to sell your product and its value to a customer. And if you can do that, you've got to sell the business and its value to investors. So it's essentially the same process. It's just, coming at it from a different angle.
So it's interesting. Last week we had Alex Hannant giving a presentation from Brisbane on where the new economies are going and new models and so forth. And it's funny, he brought up a piece that's relevant to this, and then I heard it the next day from a totally different source, which was Classic, and talking about the new currency is trust in the business world, because there's so much uncertainty out there that people don't want to build. They want to diminish the uncertainty, not build on it. And how important it is to deal with people you actually trust. And New Zealand is now ranked the number one country in the world for trust as a nation. And then so you go, so how are we going to leverage that? But, that sort of, it's something that's coming up more and more, that rather than just being this shiny thing, actually trusting something is becoming really, really important for people.
And trust is something that doesn't just appear.
It's an action. Trust is an action. And you cannot be trustworthy. People, it's how people react to you, not what, I'm not explaining it very well, but.
Well, it's like mana, right? It's something that other people
bestow
bestow upon you.
Yep.
It's not something that you can just declare that you have.
Yes, I'm trustworthy. Interesting. And so, I had this conversation with Veronica Stevenson a few weeks ago when I interviewed her for the podcast, and talking about capital raises with startups and so forth, and getting your shareholding watered down, and having to protect yourself from all of that. What are the things to look out for there, James, that you've learned across time?
Look, I think the thing to look out for is believing too much of your own bullshit before you've really validated something. Because if something's really worth investing in, you'll be able to raise money if you can communicate what it is that you're doing well. And then you won't end up with a whole lot of money that you're trying to spend to justify what you've done. So really being clear that raising money is the thing that you need to do is important. That's the thing. That's probably what I would...
Just say that again.
Really being clear that you need external money at any particular point in time. Challenging whether you can do something without the external funding. If I were to do anything differently over the last four years with Cradle, we would probably have raised less money and been more careful in particular about how we spent it. Now that's easy to say in hindsight because you know where you wouldn't spend it, and sometimes you have to spend it to find out. But I know that there were times where I was like, do we really, do we need this person? Is this going to make the boat go faster right now? Do we have the certainty about the other stuff that we've done, or are we just, as you said earlier, magnifying risk across the entire business?
Remember that great quote from Chris Amon? He was being interviewed, and they said, what would McLaren achieve if it had the finance of Ferrari? And he said, I think we'd make a bit of a mess of it, actually. And I think, it was just a wonderful answer, because, we are good at, as Kiwis, getting stuff up and going with the smell of an oil rig.
Yeah. I think we develop good products on very, very small budgets. What we don't do particularly well is sell them sell them effectively. And that's an area where New Zealand really needs to get better, including
yours truly. And so, how do we do that?
I wish I knew the answer to that.
Or what gets in the way from us doing that opposed to other countries?
So, we're a reserved bunch who typically won't beat our own chest too much, unless we're having a dick measuring competition about rugby or something. That places us at a distinct disadvantage, especially against the likes of Americans and Australians, who tend to be quite confident about what it is that they're putting in front of people. We'll tend to be almost apologetic. And it makes, if you're going and apologising for the product that you're about to demonstrate to people, and you think that it might nearly solve about a half of their problems, you've lost whatever it is that you're going to do already. Americans will go in and tell you they do everything plus another 20%, and then they'll deliver half. Now, I'm not suggesting we should be untruthful, but we definitely need to find a way to tell our stories effectively so that people understand the value in what we've built or what we've done. I think there's a very, it's a deeply ingrained part of New Zealand, especially Pākehā New Zealand society, that one. And I don't know there's no silver bullet for it, I don't think.
I remember you telling me the story of you were touring around America, peddling your wares, and you'd rented a car, I think, and somebody came up and said that, do you remember the story?
Which said, what did they say?
Well, there was, you'd rented a nice car, and some American comes up and congratulated you as a young fellow for, obviously doing well. That was
in Oregon. That was it was a lease car. It was the car that I had for the year that I lived in the States. And yeah, this guy stopped, wound down his window, and he's like, "Man, awesome car, dude." And I'm like, "Wow, that is weird." No New Zealander would ever say that. They'd be more likely to key your car for being a wanker than
yeah.
It's just and it's a very different way that society functions over there. And if you're going to operate in that market, you need to understand the rules there before you can even compete, let alone win.
Did that take time to learn, James, when you were...
it's still taking time to learn.
Yeah.
It's all very well to have awareness about something, but it's definitely a process to overcome it.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back to Spider Tracks, you sell in how many countries with Spider?
I don't know, 100.
Right. Is there 100 countries in the world? You just made that up.
186 countries in the world, or 100, I don't know.
So a lot. So do you have to be aware of the different, as you're selling, do you become more and more aware of how each country responds?
I think you've got to be a chameleon, and you've got to understand the market that you're going into. That's incredibly important. Whether it's as simple as understanding the way that Americans speak, or adapting your level of directness in different markets. In the States, you answer a question straight up. There's no beating around the bush. In Britain, you've got to be like a New Zealander. You never directly answer a question. You just fluff about. You spend your entire life beating around bushes. And, every country has its own nuances.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I remember also you saying how much more difficult you found the startup with Cradle was it a particular day, and you were saying with your extended years now with your second startup, because you're now how old?
I'm 36.
36. Oh my God, you're ancient.
Yeah.
But and I think at the time you were 34, and going, oh my God, this startup is so much more difficult than in your 20s. Is that true?
I think you've got awareness of so much more, so you can recognise the things that are difficult in a different way. And I think a couple of things have changed. So when you've been successful, it's frustrating to go back to full experimentation mode again and be unsuccessful so frequently. And when I say success, that could be, a customer thinking your product's awesome, or giving you a 10 out of 10 on an NPS score, or buying your product, or whatever. It's not just some kind of arbitrary number on a piece of accountant's paper. And I think the other thing is you're just older, right? You don't have 7 days of energy. You don't you can go to bed at nights and dream about your product or your next sale or whatever it might be, but it's pretty wearisome when you're in your mid-30s compared to when you're 22. You don't have this untethered energy anymore.
Dude, you sound like an old man.
Oh, mate. Yeah, I am an old man. I should be 70, I think.
Well, the good thing is you look it.
Oh, thanks.
So you've got a very old face.
That distinguished look.
Distinguished look, yeah. So the future, James, where, and then we're gonna close off with a conversation around New Zealand. So, because you've got an opinion on most things, so let's draw that out. Future, any idea where you want to head?
I want to keep solving problems that So if I step back a little bit and just give a tiny bit more context on Cradle, I love having a good conversation with people. I think it's really important, and it's something that the world increasingly lacks. And we treat communication as this functional thing to share or to push a piece of information in one direction without the sort of the context that we're two humans. We're social animals. Having a conversation enables us to share more than just one piece of information in one direction. It enables us to learn about each other, to empathize with each other, to build and start demonstrating to someone that we are trustworthy.
So you're talking about dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. And the phone is such a fantastic means to do that. In a world where a chatbot or an email or a support ticket or self-help on a forum somewhere might be more convenient for the business, but aren't necessarily a good thing for society. So there's a little bit of me going, you know what, the world would be a better place if we all just talk to each other a little bit more sometimes. Maybe I'm just being too idealistic here. So beyond trying to help businesses embrace that and do that well without breaking the bank, I don't know what lies beyond that for me. I want to make this business successful. I think we are. We've got lots of customers who think we have a fantastic product and who consistently give us 10 out of 10 on an NPS, which is really cool. So I want to make a success out of that, and I want to take this company outside New Zealand as I've done before. And then I don't know what I want to do. Buy 50 hectares up in Northland and grow some carrots, maybe. I don't know.
Carrots?
I don't know.
They grow kumara up there.
Veggies in the garden.
Yeah. You offered me a tomato.
You turned my tomato down.
Well, yeah. So, James, can we now flip the conversation to the New Zealand economy and get your views on that, please?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. This is the first working day post-election day, isn't it? I think New Zealand has a fantastic opportunity in front of it right now. Money's cheap. We've already spent a lot, so we've got a decent amount of the future that's going to be set aside to help pay that back. But this is a what I see as a fantastic opportunity for New Zealand to really evaluate the things that we do and make sure that we're doing the right things for the kind of future that we as a country want. Do we want to be a cheap destination for Europeans to fly to and spend 6 months traveling around in an escape rental? Or do we want to be a country that leads the world in things that actually help us sustain our species? And that's a big question. We produce fantastic food here, and we have ways of producing food that are some of the best in the world, but they could certainly be better. We're, as you said, generally pretty clever and ingenious people. We come from a history of having to build stuff without necessarily having all the resource that a lot of other societies have. So how do we take that mentality and that thinking and apply it to some of the bigger problems that the world has so that New Zealand can be the source of some of these solutions without necessarily having to be the factory for some of these solutions? Now, I'm sure there are a lot of cleverer, more interesting people than me thinking about these problems. But it does strike me as ridiculous that tourism was a major industry for the country that's farthest from anywhere else in the world. I get it, it's beautiful here, but it's also expensive to get here.
It also seemed a little bit lazy, James.
Well, it's easy, right? We've had 10 years of growth fueled mainly by a little bit of tourism and a bunch of new people showing up. And that sort of puts another question out there. Is growth the thing that we should really be measuring? Growth is essentially just a function of our ability to consume and potentially borrow in order to consume. So why is that the metric by which we hold ourselves to account? It just doesn't make sense.
And going back to Alex Hannant's presentation last week, it's just the GDP thing as a measure is going out the window, because it just, and I would also argue that capitalism essentially hasn't worked. That we need to find another way of conducting commerce.
Yeah, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that it hasn't worked. It's been a system that's delivered a lot of things over 250 years, with more or less success. But whether or not it's sustainable into the future is a totally different matter. We don't produce any more than we put it this way. Our ability to improve the efficiency of production, to improve productiveness, is severely declining. And there's a question around whether we actually need to be 100 times more productive than we are right now. Or do we just need to actually enjoy the things that we produce a little bit more? Anyway.
Do you want to finish on the housing?
Oh, don't. I think it's ridiculous that we live in a country where, there's an asset class that's essentially tax-free, that is the primary way that most New Zealanders generate their wealth. And it's essentially unproductive. And then we have hundreds of thousands of people living in houses that are shit. It seems all backwards to me. I don't understand why a business is taxed, but a housing investment isn't. It doesn't make any sense. You can gear it and deduct your interest efficiently so that you essentially don't have to put any money in. But then, 5 years later, your capital gains are all tax-free, and your tenants have lived in a shit house for 5 years. It seems pretty unfair when you compare it to those who invest in other classes of assets.
On your travels around the world, James, have you looked at a country's economy and thought, man, it would be great if we adopted some of those policies?
I wanna answer that question, but I'm not sure that I am knowledgeable enough on the subject to.
So it is just your opinion. Well, so just your opinion. It is your opinion. So as a non-expert, because something's going on inside your head.
Yeah, I don't really want to answer that question. I'm not even. I'm not sure that I have a country that I look at and go, yeah, that's what we should aim for.
No,
I think
so I'm not talking about it as an overall. I'm talking about bits. I'm looking at, you see bits in a country and go, man, we could do that.
I think, and this is potentially controversial, and this is on the fly, so I'm just thinking of this as we go. I think the Swiss have a very interesting relationship with their land. Their land is there to produce what they need and nothing more, and it needs to look good and it needs to be well looked after. Again, not saying that we should be like Switzerland, just, this is off the cuff, Harv. I do admire the Scandinavian countries. I think they have some really sensible policy, and they recognise that. Look, let me step back for a sec. Wealthy people just compare themselves to their peers, and within any pond, the goal for most people in a somewhat capitalist society is to be the biggest fish. It doesn't really matter how big you are. If you're comparing yourself to other ponds, you're only really looking at those around you. And I think the fear that a different pond could have a different set of rules drives a lot of policy making, and especially in the areas of tax and equity and all of these sorts of things. I see Judith Collins rattling on about, do we want a wealth tax? And yet we have this huge amount of lazy equity that sits around doing nothing for us. It's not keeping anyone employed. It's not making any food. It's not exporting anything. It's not doing anything productive. It's just sitting there. And it's slowly appreciating just because that's all, rapidly appreciating in some cases.
Yep.
Whilst generating nothing. And yet a whole lot of people who are out there busting their balls to generate something are taking all the risk, bringing all the productivity gains to the country, and they're taxed for all of those efforts. So I think lazy equity is a big problem. And using a somewhat regulated free-ish market to encourage that equity into more productive areas of the economy would be really smart. I don't have the perfect silver bullet answer to that.
But that's an interesting one to crack, because you can borrow money easily in New Zealand off a hardcore asset.
Yeah.
But you cannot for something, financing spider tracks or Cradle is a whole different, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Because the banks don't want to touch it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know the answer to that, because that's a cultural thing in New Zealand. That's something that's a deep-rooted cultural thing.
And I think there's another cultural problem's the wrong word, but quirk of New Zealand, and it comes back to the pond size thing that I was talking about before, is that often people get to to be the largest carp in this pond, and that means they've got a Bentley or a Bimmer or a boat and a batch and the 3 or the 4 Bs or whatever it is, and a business that turns over $15 million and spits $1 million out the bottom end, and that's the ultimate in success here, and then they stop, and those businesses just kind of sit there and do that forever, when they could use that free cash flow as an opportunity to do much, much bigger things for both their owners, but also the society in New Zealand and the world.
Yep.
Anyway, we're kind of rambling a little bit.
So, James, to round this off, anything we've missed that you want to touch on?
nothing that can fit into 3 minutes at the end, I don't think.
Okay, so I'm going to finish with a story. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
You know the story I'm going to tell.
Yeah.
I love this story. So James was our first scholarship recipient, and I badgered him to take this thing on. And
I thought he was a fucking weirdo at the time, by the way.
He still does. And did you? Did you think I was a weirdo?
Yeah.
Can I take this as a compliment?
Yeah, and I thought you dyed your hair as well, but apparently not.
He did. James was on to me for years. I think he does. So James, and I was a facilitator then, who was weird and dyed his hair. No, he didn't dye his hair. And James joined the group that was already formed, and I thought, right, I'm going to leave him near the end of the day to join into the group so he can get the feel of how the group went. And it was a fairly highly charged afternoon with the team, and they were going through a whole lot of different issues they were dealing with. And at the end of the day, I said, okay, James, so now we're going to pass over to you. And, what's going on for you? The first words out of your mouth were...
I'm not as fucked up as you lot.
Were his first words to the team. And they turned around, they laughed, they went, give it time, son, give it time.
Yeah, and right they were.
And it took about 4 months when you're as fucked up as that lot. It was one of the most memorable times I've had facilitating. It was just a beautiful piece of poetry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fantastic. And, it was a great team. That collective intelligence team that helped me through the 4 or 5 years after that were really, really good.
Yeah.
Couldn't have done it without them. Yeah. But then Harv buggered off, and
and then
we lost the jester.
I was a wonderful facilitator. James, thank you for the interview. Thank you for doing the great work. And I think with Spider Tracks, there are 40 people, working away in New Zealand and creating this stuff, and that, as you said, 90% of the income comes back into the country, and that's just very, very cool. So well done, good luck with Cradle on the next stage, and look forward to some more dialogues going forward. You've just been listening to an episode of Stuff That Matters Now, brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fun stuff, the rugged stuff, and the complete stuff-ups that have helped this particular Collective Intelligence member evolve while making the world a better place. Do check out our Stuff That Matters Now podcast series on your favourite podcast provider, or visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz to get links to new episodes. Contact us if you want to learn more about how we can help you evolve yourself and others. Thanks for listening.